Hey guys, it's Zerx What If, and welcome back to part 7 of What If Yuji was like Garou. Before I get started, I do want to say that I apologize for not uploading for a while. I have been sick, and it was a little harder for me to speak, but I do feel a little better now, and I'm going to try to push out these videos for you guys. So yeah, without further ado, let's just get right into it. Continuing where we left off, Sukuna had taken over Yuji's body right after Yorozu had sent a hole straight through his chest. Sukuna would tell Yorozu that she has exactly 30 minutes before Yuji will return, so it's either he can make this as quick and painless for her as possible, or the boy comes back and absolutely demolishes her. Yorozu would laugh and say that boy couldn't do anything. He could barely react to the spear in time. Sukuna would laugh and say that the boy was caught off guard. He would tell Yorozu that if she were to fight the boy one-on-one, he could probably beat her. But since she left him in a near-death state, she's left with him. That's when Yorozu would smile and say that she's been waiting for this for hundreds of years. She's going to show Sukuna as much love as she possibly can. Sukuna would make a disgusted look and tell her that she's gross. There's only one type of love for him, and she doesn't have it. She would tell Sukuna that he wouldn't know because he wouldn't allow her to show it to him. Sukuna would then laugh and say that he plans on keeping it that way as well. Yorozu would then get upset and ask Sukuna, why is he sticking around this brat anyway? Why not take full control over his body and do whatever he pleases? Sukuna would stare at Yorozu and tell her him and the brat had made a deal and that he's simply upholding his end of the bargain. And to be quite fair, he's taking a liking to the brat. He would then ask Yorozu the same question. Why does she have on a different face? She would then tell Sukuna that it was simple. The appearance will serve her better for later. Sukuna would smile and then chuckle, asking Yorozu if she truly believes that she'll live until later. Yorozu would kiss her teeth, sending 2 thick streams of black liquid towards Sukuna. He would laugh with her taking the bait. Sukuna would avoid one of the streams, but not realize Yorozu was riding atop the other when trying to close the distance. She would jump down off the metal liquid, clashing with Sukuna. They would both then begin to exchange blows with one another, parrying each other until Sukuna would kick her away. However, Yorozu would nullify the impact by constructing a plate of metal liquid in between them to block the impact. Yorozu would laugh and begin to tease Sukuna. Smiling ear to ear, she would tell Sukuna that she couldn't wait to get her hands on him. Her love for him is so much, she simply wants to kill Sukuna. She would scream out to Sukuna, asking what would she get if she were to kill Sukuna. Sukuna, not really interested in whatever she was talking about, would simply say if she's able to kill him, he would give her everything that he has. Even though Sukuna knows that losing would mean death, he doesn't care. He would ask her if she's done with her rambling so they can continue fighting, with her saying that she's more excited than ever now. Sukuna would smile and say good. Sukuna would then begin to activate Flowing Red Scale Stack as he would begin to rush towards Yorozu. Yorozu would notice this, sending a wave of spikes created from liquid metal directly towards Sukuna. However, Sukuna would simply jump over it, clashing with Yorozu yet again. Yorozu would attempt to make a spike cage made out of liquid metal to encapsulate Sukuna. However, he would notice this and dodge immediately, sidestepping out of the way, getting to the side of her and kicking her on the side of the stomach. She would just barely react in time, creating another plate of liquid metal that would block the impact, though this time the impact was a lot stronger than it was the first time. Yorozu would catch herself and ask Sukuna why isn't he using Shrine and using whatever technique that boy has. Sukuna would roll his eyes and tell her to stop talking, please. He's doing it because he wants to. It's as simple as that. This would infuriate Yorozu, feeling as if she was being insulted, thinking that Sukuna believed that he could beat her without using Shrine. She would use her curse technique to create insect armor around her, basically enhancing herself the same way Sukuna was. She would tell him that she was going to force him to use Shrine and show him that he has to take her seriously, especially since she's his future wife. Sukuna would gag as Yorozu would charge forward in her insect armor. Yorozu would use her sudden speed to attempt to blitz Sukuna. However, with Sukuna still using Flowing Red Scale Stack, he would catch on to her quickly. She would attempt to land several punches. However, Sukuna would block each one, with the last punch going towards his gut, with him catching that one and sending him backwards quite a bit. Yorozu would attempt to pick up the pace, circling around Sukuna. She would then kick him in the side, crashing him into a building. She would then laugh and ask Sukuna if he's still not so sure about using Shrine. She would then begin to close the distance on Sukuna once more, as she would beg him to cut her open and witness her love. She would then use creation once more, creating numerous spikes that were flung straight towards Sukuna. Instead of blocking or dodging this time, Sukuna would simply use blood manipulation, creating blood armor on his hands, tripling the fortification on the armor. By stacking the armor numerous times on top of each other, he would smack each spear away, asking Yorozu is that really all she had. Yorozu would then say that's not even close to the amount of love that she has to show him. She would then begin to fully rush at Sukuna, charging in as fast as she could. However, taking inspiration from Yorozu herself, he would make blood armor, wrapping it around his entire body, stacking it just like he did to his hands. Yorozu would attempt to ram headfirst into Sukuna, attempting to crack his armor, showing that hers was superior. However, to her surprise, as she would clash with Sukuna, she would be brought to a complete halt. Sukuna would then begin to laugh, saying that he guesses that really was all she had. Sukuna would cock back his fist, punching Yorozu straight in the face, sending her flying backwards. She would be flown through the air as she would catch herself using her insect wings. But just as she would catch herself, she would see Sukuna sprinting straight towards her, realizing that she has no time or any breathing room at all. She would attempt to use creation to attempt to soften the blows of the impact. However, with Sukuna using flowing red scale stack plus the armor, the blows were simply too much for Yorozu. Sukuna would strike at Yorozu's torso, cracking the insect armor. He would then continue to rocket blow after blow, as each attack seemed to be getting stronger than the last. By the end of Sukuna's assault, Yorozu's armor was completely torn off, and with Sukuna's final strike, he would strike her in the torso, sending her flying towards a building, with her crashing into it. Sukuna would then laugh and mock Yorozu, asking Yorozu if this performance was all her love amounts to. Yorozu would shoot out from the building and reject his comment, proclaiming that she'll be the one to teach Sukuna about love because she understands the loneliness that comes with being the strongest. Sukuna would smirk and roll his eyes. Yorozu would demand that she would be the one to show him what real love is, promising Sukuna that she would construct her heart, the true manifestation of her love. Using the pinnacle of her construction, Yorozu would create a true spear. Sukuna would sit there and smile, as Yorozu would then say domain expansion, threefold affliction. Yorozu would then tell Sukuna that he has no choice now. Yorozu knows that if she activates her technique, she'll win. Sukuna would then smile and laugh, and say that he guesses she's right. Yorozu would attempt to hurry up and activate her technique. However, Sukuna was simply faster than her. He would say the words domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine. As Yorozu's domain would completely shatter, she would look on in awe as she would realize right there, even though she was about to lose, she had technically won, because she had made Sukuna use his shrine technique. Before anything would even happen, Yorozu would tell Sukuna that she guesses she was worthy, as Malevolent Shrine would activate, cutting Yorozu to bits and pieces. Sukuna would roll his eyes and say that the boy simply didn't have the technique in order to defeat that. Sukuna would close out his domain, as he would realize Yorozu left him something just before she was killed. He would begin to laugh and say that he guesses she wasn't so useless after all. Sukuna would then sit there for a while and then realize that it's been way past 30 minutes, so why hasn't the brat taken over his body? Sukuna would then speak out, "Brat, what's going on?" As Yuji would form a mouth on the side of Sukuna's face. He would tell Sukuna that he's not sure on what to do anymore. Sukuna would ask Yuji what does he mean. Yuji would tell Sukuna that he wants to be at the pinnacle of power. He wants to be at the top to where he can change the rules of Jujutsu society. He hates the way things are run. However, when it always comes down to it, he always loses. Being caught off guard like that, if Yuji was stronger, he would have realized almost immediately, and Sukuna wouldn't have even had to take over. Sukuna would sigh and tell Yuji that he needs to stand proud because he is strong. There are just others in the world who are always stronger than you. Yuji would laugh and ask Sukuna what about him. Sukuna would say that he's a special case and that he shouldn't compare himself to the likes of him. Sukuna would tell Yuji that he made a vow with him, but he's taking a liking to the boy. You seek power in order to change the world, in order to sit at the top, and he respects that from Yuji more than anything else. Sukuna would tell Yuji that whatever his ideals are, and whatever he wants them to be, as long as he stays true to those, Yuji would be absolutely unstoppable. Yuji would thank Sukuna. However, Sukuna would tell Yuji not to do that, simply because he doesn't like it. However, just before either of them could say another thing, a lightning bolt would appear right before Sukuna. He would see it and react just in time, creating blood armor on his body, stacking it numerous times. As it would strike the armor, blasting the armor away, as Kashimo would scream out, yelling Sukuna's name. as Sukuna would let off a long sigh, saying that he wishes he didn't have a whole bunch of fans. He would ask Yuji if he would like to take over and give his ideals a try, as Yuji would say sure, and that he would also take into consideration to what Sukuna was saying to him. Yuji would fully commit to his ideals, becoming the strongest and making sure he can change the Jujutsu Society world. No matter what he had to do, no matter how long it took, he was going to become greedy just as Sukuna was. And during this fight, he would show that his ideals meant more than anything else. Kashimo would clash with Yuji, asking where Sukuna went, telling Yuji to bring Sukuna back now. Yuji would tell Kashimo that if he wants Sukuna to come back, he's going to have to beat Sukuna out of him. But Yuji doesn't plan on losing. Fueled by Sukuna's words and his own ideals, Yuji had found a new spark, and in this battle, he was going to make sure to fuel the fire, the drive to get stronger, the drive to change the Jujutsu Society, the drive to become the person that he wants to become for the future. If he were to lose this battle here, his ideals would mean absolutely nothing. However, if he were to win, it would change absolutely everything. Kashimo would laugh and tell Yuji that he only has to beat Sukuna out of him, right? He would have a serious grin and say that should be easy enough. Using his staff, Kashimo would swing it around himself, sending an attack straight towards Yuji's side. However, Yuji would reinforce himself with blood armor, blocking the attack. However, to Yuji's surprise, the armor would crack. This is where Yuji would realize this guy was insanely strong, and it's no wonder that he wants to fight Sukuna. The attack would send Yuji backwards a bit, but he would catch himself almost immediately, with Kashimo closing the distance once more, beginning hand-to-hand combat with Yuji. Yuji would throw a strong right, reinforcing his entire arm with blood armor, as Kashimo would block the attack with his staff. However, he would get sent flying straight into a building, realizing Yuji's strength as well. Kashimo would think to himself, realizing that he must have been Sukuna's vessel for a reason. Kashimo would regain his balance, but Yuji would already be on top of him. Yuji would swing again, going for the same right hook as he went for the first time. However, Kashimo would attempt to grab the attack, but this is exactly what Yuji wanted from him. As Kashimo would go for the grab, Yuji would duck underneath it, grabbing Kashimo's arm in the process. He would then send two straight jabs towards Kashimo's face, as Kashimo would break his arm free, pulling back from Yuji's grasp. Yuji would then attempt to send a kick straight towards Kashimo's head. However, Kashimo would bend backwards, avoiding the kick, using his staff as leverage. Kashimo would be amazed, seeing if this brat was no joke. He came here to fight Sukuna, but Yuji was strong in his own right. This fight was going to be amazing. Kashimo would be happy that the vessel for Sukuna wasn't as weak as he thought he was, but he would tell Yuji that they're going to turn up the volume now, because he still wants to fight Sukuna. He also realizes that the only reason Yuji is able to disperse his electricity attacks is because of the stacked blood armor that he's creating. Although it doesn't completely insulate the electricity, Yuji is stacking the armor just enough to where it doesn't do a lot of damage. Kashimo would be fascinated at the fact that Yuji was this strong and would begin to test him again. Kashimo would then rush forward once more, clashing with Yuji. He would start the attack with a punch, as Yuji would bend backwards to dodge the attack. As Kashimo would attempt to continue to apply pressure, Yuji would stretch back even more, sending his legs up, sending a kick straight towards Kashimo's jaw, sending him flying upwards. Kashimo would laugh and commend Yuji for the move. Kashimo would then use the area around him to bounce off of it, clashing with Yuji once more. However, he would tell Yuji if this was all he had, it was going to be a bad day for him. Kashimo would then send an overhead slam towards Yuji, sending both of his fists crashing down. However, Yuji would grab the attack, but Kashimo would send a kick after, hitting Yuji in the torso, sending him flying. Kashimo would then grab his staff and throw it at Yuji. Yuji would be confused, seeing as he didn't even see Kashimo pick up the staff, but Yuji would dodge out of the way of the staff, as the staff would crash into a nearby wall. He would then rush towards Yuji, as Yuji would rush towards him. They would begin hand-to-hand combat again, where Yuji would engage first. Yuji would send a punch towards Kashimo using his left, however, Kashimo would block it, using his arm to push Yuji's hand out of the way. Kashimo would then throw several rapid-fire punches towards Yuji, connecting each of them with his body and face. Yuji would kiss his teeth, realizing that this battle was harder than he thought it was going to be. Yuji would then activate Flowing Red Scale and begin to pick up the pace with Kashimo. They would both begin exchanging blows with one another, both blocking, dodging, and connecting blows with one another. Yuji would throw another punch again, however this time it was faster, allowing it to connect with Kashimo's head. This would send Kashimo's head flying back, however, he would swing his head back down, smiling ear to ear, saying that he knew this fight was going to be fun. Kashimo would continue his assault, as Yuji would continue to block and dodge attacks, but out of nowhere, Yuji could feel the air around him begin to feel weird. Something was up, but he just couldn't realize what it was. Just then, Yuji would remember the staff. He didn't think that Kashimo would throw it for no reason at all. Kashimo would attempt to continue his assault, but Yuji would quickly activate Flowing Red Scale Stack, parrying the 2 jabs that Kashimo was attempting to throw at him. He would strike Kashimo in the face, then hit him in the chest, then sweep him at the legs. He would then turn around. He would notice a lightning bolt coming straight towards him. By the time Yuji had realized, the lightning bolt was almost right on top of him. He had barely just enough time to activate his armor on his hands. However, due to the accumulation of lightning, it would blast off the armor and his hand, as Yuji would wince in pain, and Kashimo would laugh, saying that Yuji was smarter than he thought he was. He would have expected Yuji to be a past sorcerer if he didn't know who he was already. The way Yuji fights is almost the same as those who used to fight almost 400 years ago. Yuji would then use reverse curse technique. He would then throw his hand on the ground, activating cleave, cutting the area up around them to try to gain some distance on Kashimo. However, Kashimo would simply jump over it, jumping straight towards Yuji as he would use cleave. However, Yuji was also prepared for this to happen. Yuji would smile as he would look up, activating his curse form. He would clash with Kashimo, grabbing his 2 arms with his top arms. Kashimo would laugh and say, "Now ain't that something?" Yuji would attempt to swing his bottom arms towards Kashimo, hitting him in the torso, but Kashimo would tuck his body in, swinging his legs up as he would kick Yuji in the face, causing Yuji to let go of Kashimo with his top arms. As then Kashimo would then use Yuji's face as a footstool, jumping off of it. As Kashimo would land on the ground, he would sprint forward back towards Yuji again. Yuji would then use Dismantle, sending slashes at Kashimo. However, Kashimo would see this, stepping on the ground, sending debris upwards in the air as it would slash the debris, going through it and slightly slashing Kashimo. Kashimo would laugh and tell Yuji that he's just a rip-off Sukuna. Kashimo would then say that it's funny that Yuji is the vessel of Sukuna. However, everything he does is simply to copy Sukuna. Yuji isn't even his own person. He's just a miniature version of Sukuna. Kashimo would tell Yuji that he'll never win like that. Yuji would then realize Kashimo was 100% right. Everything Yuji had done, everything Yuji had grown, everything Yuji had made was simply a blueprint from Sukuna. His original curse form that he had learned himself and he had never put into play was used by Sukuna first in order to make his 4-armed form, because Yuji couldn't figure out a form that was fit for him. Shrine was also an ability that Sukuna had allowed him to use due to him being the vessel. Along with blood manipulation, majority of the ways that Yuji uses it is the same way that Sukuna uses it. None of the abilities that Yuji used were abilities that he created from himself. The only thing that Yuji knew how to do was fight. Yuji had never realized, but now he did. Yuji would begin to laugh. It would start off as a small laugh and then begin to get louder and louder until Yuji would make an abrupt stop, and this is when Sukuna inside of Yuji would simply smile. Yuji would revert his body back into his original form and tell Kashimo that he thanks him. He truly thanks him for making him come to the realization. The only reason Yuji has been so weak is because he hasn't been as greedy as he thought he's been. He's been copying someone else's power, hoping to get stronger with someone else's power, not even his own. If it's his ability, he was going to make it his own and not copy the blueprint from what someone else has. Sukuna would then begin laughing inside of Yuji. Realizing that the brat has finally realized, without Yuji hearing, he would congratulate him, saying that he's finally taken the first steps into true Jujutsu sorcery. Yuji would then begin to transform yet again. But this transformation was almost a truly violent one. Blood would begin to wrap around his body like muscles, tightening themselves. As they would begin hardening over and over, he would overlap the blood multiple times. As each layer would harden and get darker and darker, Yuji's body would look slimmer. But just by looking at Yuji, you could tell, even though he was slim, the strength that he possessed was absolutely outworldly. The armor would wrap around his entire body, covering even his face. His entire body would change. Even the properties of his body would change as well. Kashimo would have a serious look on his face and begin to smile. He would tell Yuji, now this is what he was talking about. Yuji would seemingly have no face, with the armor seemingly looking that way. The only thing you could see on Yuji's face were the marks from Flowing Red Scale Stack. Yuji would stand in a ready stance, preparing for battle, as he would rush in towards Kashimo at a newfound speed, surprising Kashimo. Yuji would send a right straight towards Kashimo. However, Kashimo would block the attack, but to Kashimo's surprise, being struck in the arm, Yuji's punch would send small cleaves all across Kashimo's arm, as well as sending blood from the blood manipulation through his arm as well. As the cleaves would travel up his arm, the blood from the blood manipulation would travel there as well. Kashimo would be surprised, attempting to push himself off Yuji. However, surprising Kashimo again, Yuji's blood on Kashimo's arm will begin to harden and dig its way into Kashimo's arm. Kashimo didn't realize, but the blood itself was still sending miniature cleaves, slashing Kashimo's arms, digging into it until it was going to eventually fall off. It was as if the blood was alive, even off of Yuji's body. Kashimo would then curse to himself, realizing that he may have to use his mythical amber beast form, even though he only wanted to use it on Sukuna. Kashimo would then laugh and say that he refuses to allow himself to die before he gets the chance to fight Sukuna. Yuji wouldn't say anything though, as he would be completely locked onto Kashimo. He would rush in again, beginning hand-to-hand combat with Kashimo, this time having the complete upper hand, due to one of Kashimo's arms being almost taken out of commission. Kashimo would then say that he can't afford to be hit by one of Yuji's attacks again, and that he'll simply have to dodge, because even if he blocks, each attack is still deadly in its own. Yuji would send blow after blow, with Kashimo barely dodging each blow in time. Yuji would then swing a left, Kashimo dodging backwards, realizing that Yuji had overextended. He would attempt to follow up, trying to finally attack Yuji where he could. Just then, Kashimo would throw his left, striking Yuji in the arm. As he would punch, blood would splatter off of Yuji's arm, splattering onto Kashimo. However, Kashimo would be confused. Why wasn't the blood armor hard? Just then, Yuji would use blood manipulation, using blood meteorite to explode the blood that had landed on top of Kashimo. Kashimo would take a large amount of damage, but he had accumulated enough electricity again, realizing that the blood wasn't hardened, would send electricity straight towards Yuji, as blood was a good conductor and Yuji was encapsulated by it. This one attack should take out Yuji. As the lightning strike would come straight towards Yuji, Yuji would reach out his hand. As the lightning strike would hit his hand, it would blast off his entire arm. As Kashimo would laugh, he would then tell Yuji that it's checkmate. But to Kashimo's surprise, Yuji would simply regrow his arm without any effort at all, rushing back at Kashimo once more, hitting him with a devastating combo. Yuji would send a flurry of rapid fire punches towards Kashimo's face, with each strike using cleave, slashing at Kashimo's face over and over. Yuji would then deliver a powerful right straight punch, connecting straight towards Kashimo's torso, hitting him with a strong black flash. This would cause Kashimo to cough up blood, as well as sending cleaves throughout Kashimo's entire body, as well as sending the blood manipulation through all of them. The black flash was simply too much for Kashimo. He wasn't expecting to be hit with one, especially this late into the battle, as Kashimo's entire body would be riddled with cleaves and all of his wounds seep with Yuji's blood manipulation, with miniature cleaves digging throughout his entire body. Kashimo was at wit's end. Kashimo would scream out that he wasn't done yet and that he still had to fight Sukuna, but Yuji would say no and that enough was enough. He's ending it here. He would tell Kashimo that he should have went all out. The second Yuji transformed, the battle was over. The second Yuji realized what he was doing wrong, Kashimo lost. Yuji would then send a dismantle that had a lining of blood manipulation onto it, straight towards Kashimo. It would slash at his body, and Yuji's blood that was currently inside of Kashimo would then begin to explode, as if it was a chain attack. The second the dismantle would connect with Kashimo, each individual blood that was already sending miniature cleaves throughout Kashimo's body would then begin to explode, causing larger cleaves to go throughout Kashimo's body, shredding the entirety of his insides, causing Kashimo to collapse and die on the spot. Yuji would begin to laugh, as he would deactivate Flowing Red Scale Stack, and then deactivate his transformation. Yuji would simply smile and say that he knows what he wants to do now, and I think that's where I'm going to end it off. Thank you guys for waiting for so long, and again, I apologize for not uploading for so long, but again, I was sick, but yeah. I'm going to try to push out more uploads for you guys. I'm going to try getting up earlier so I can record instead of going to work and then trying to record late at night because I'm just too tired to record. But yeah, I'll try to fix my schedule, record more for you guys. And yeah, thank you for listening and yeah, peace.